Time permits, questions will also be asked from those submitted by guests at the forum. Answers are limited to 2 meetings. Our timekeeper is in the front. He has a yellow. He'll let you know 30 seconds and he'll flip it over to red when time is up. So if we can get our 9th Congressional District candidates to the stage now so we can start, we appreciate it. No, it does not, and I think does it. They are on here outside, so let's go. Brown, Collins, Fitzpatrick. We'll do it like that.
Everyone is seated, so we will begin with our U.S. Congress District 9 U.S. Senate candidates. I will just repeat that each candidate will have a 2-minute opening statement. Candidates will respond to 3 questions prepared by the Candidates Forum Committee. If time permits, questions will also be asked from those submitted by guests here at the forum, and answers will be limited to 2 minutes. So we will begin with our 2-minute opening statement, and we will start closest to us here with Mr. Paul Brown. 2 minutes.
For about a year, I have been encouraged to run for this seat for the 9th Congressional District. I represented 11 of the 20 counties. This is the most conservative congressional district in the state of Georgia, the 3rd most conservative district in the whole nation. And conservatives across the district have watched our current congressman's voting pattern, and they've been very disappointed. They feel betrayed, actually. They feel most betrayed by the omnibus bill that was voted on back last December. That omnibus bill funds Planned Parenthood. It funds Obamacare in its entirety. It funds the Syrian refugee program. It funds the President's amnesty program. It funds Common Core. It creates another $500 billion worth of debt. This is what the establishment and our current congressman, who's part of that establishment, are doing in Washington, D.C. Folks, this has to stop. I'm fed up with Doug Collins. I'm fed up with establishment in Washington, D.C. I'm fed up with John Boehner. I'm fed up with everything that's going on up there, and we've got to return to the Constitution as our founding fathers meant it. That's what my voting record is all about. I've never voted for an omnibus bill. I've never voted to raise the debt ceiling. I've never voted for a tax increase. I represent you, not the establishment in Washington, D.C. That's the reason I ask you to vote for Paul Brown for the U.S. Congress.
Next, we will have the opening statement for 2 minutes from the incumbent, Doug Collins.
Thank you, everyone. It's good to be here, and it's always good to be here because I just love to come and hear what Paul's going to say next. At first, we moved into the district. That's pretty interesting to say, but that's a whole different topic. But the other interesting thing is really why we ran was looking ahead to the district, and Willie Riles said, and Roger just showed me a picture when we were here about 4 years ago. It's still the same. It's my kids. It's Jordan, Copeland, and Cameron. It's what we stand for. But the interesting thing about what Paul says is really take it with a grain of salt. Never voted for an omnibus bill? That's not true. And either he's trying to... Well, he doesn't. He's either incompetent or he's just thinks you're stupid. So in 2012, I'll show you the vote. We've got it over here. Just show it up. It's right there. Even the parliamentarian in the House yesterday said, yeah, he voted for it. And the interesting part about it is he was trying to say that there's only one Republican that voted against it. Well, the reason was it's like most omnibus bills. At that time, it had some war funding in it. The Democrats didn't like it, so they voted partly against it. But the bottom line is he voted for it. So let's just start off with truth, and let's just start off with this saying, here it is. He can't say it any other way. The other issues that we have, and we'll talk about, I'm sure, as it'll come up in this debate today, is issues of putting your district first, putting the state of Georgia first, looking at the issues of what we have had. And one of the things is we were going to discuss today is the fact that when you look at a record, you look at these statements, you look at what is going on, you look at the vision for governing. And today, as we answer these questions, as we go forward, I think the best thing that you can start off saying, who's telling you the truth? And the fact is, you just heard someone who didn't. And I just ask for you to vote now. Early voting's going on, and also on May 24th, vote for Doug Collins. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now our 2-minute opening statement from Roger Fitzpatrick.
Thank you. I am Roger Fitzpatrick. I'm born and raised in White County. My career was in education, retired in 2012, and still involved in education in that I teach 3 days a week at a homeschool academy, and I also am a site administrator with a charter school, Mountain Education Charter High School. I'm in this race because I am highly, highly concerned with the future of our nation. And the biggest concern that I have is the mounting level of debt that is facing our country. Currently, we're over $19.25 trillion in debt, and we're facing unfunded liabilities of over $100 trillion. Now, I don't know about you, but my brain has a hard time comprehending that amount of money. And I see no end in sight. In the past 4 years, we have had deficit spending of over $400, $500, $600 billion. This year, we're projected to have deficit spending of $616 billion, adding to that debt. And that debt is owed by every person in the United States. We're passing on more and more and more and more debt to our children and our grandchildren. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it's time that we do something serious about the future of our nation, because if we continue along this path of adding $500 billion, $1 trillion of debt every year, how can we sustain that? It is time to make tough decisions. It's time to rein in the federal government. It's time to change direction so that this nation can again become the greatest nation. It is the greatest nation, but we are so far from what we could be. I look forward to discussing the issues this morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, we'll move on to our opening statement from Bernie Fontaine.
Good morning. First, I'd like to thank the Honor Guard. I spent a lot of time in the military, and I have to say they're the best I've ever seen. And Colonel Fletcher, you deserve a medal, and I wish I had one to give you. Now, let me talk about me. I'm from Suches, Georgia. I spent 30 years in the military. I started at the bottom and worked my way to the top. And after that, I taught political science for 15 years. I'm in this for the same reason that these people on either side of me are in it, for all the right reasons. We believe that it's time for a change. Now, what are we doing here, and what are we going to do about it? Well, we're here to decide if 1 of 5 is the right answer. And that's your job. It's all of our job. So we have 2 career politicians and 3 citizen candidates. If you like what you've had for the last few years, you can go with the career politicians. If you don't, look at the 3 of us over here. Now, they're in it for the right reasons, so what you need to look at are the qualifications. And like I said, I have been in it for a long time, and what we really need in Washington that we absolutely don't have, and you've seen it recently on the television sets, is leadership. There is no leadership there, period. I have more leadership training and experience than all the candidates put together. I also have managed budgets, multi-million-dollar budgets. I've never blown a budget. I've always come in under budget, and I have saved millions of dollars for the taxpayers. Again, there is nobody else that has that qualification. My education is all relevant. I went through Red Eye University while in the military. I started off with a bachelor in business, a master's in public administration, and now I'm a doctoral candidate in political science. Excuse me. And my red sign is up. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, red means stop. All right, thank you, Mr. Fontaine. And finally, we'll have 2 minutes of opening remarks from Mike Scupine.
My background is in small business. I've been a licensed land surveyor operating a small business in Dahlonega and also in Gainesville. I've been in developing, I've been in building. I understand the regulations that are being put on small business by the EPA and other organizations in our government that need to be stopped. I've also got an AE degree in architecture, a BBA in economics, and I hold a master's degree in technology management from Southern Polytechnic State University. We heard this morning that we need to hear the truth. We do need to hear the truth. That's why I have gotten into this race, is I'm tired of not hearing truth coming out of Washington. I'm tired of watching what I call the Collins dog and pony show. On the table, you'll find an example of the dog and pony show in his literature. Obama's lawlessness makes things worse. 40 years, what has he done to stop Obama? Anybody know? Nothing. On the back, he says, secure the border. What has Congress done under Collins' leadership to secure the border? Nothing. It says, stop letting terrorists in. In the most recent omnibus bill, he voted to fund refugee resettlement, which continues to bring terrorists into our nation. He says, fight Obama's amnesty plan. Again, in the omnibus bill, he voted to fund every immigration program that President Obama wanted. Is that what we want in Washington? Someone that's going to help someone like President Obama? I don't think so. He talked about the debt, or Roger talked about the debt. What has he done to help bring that debt down? Any significant amount? The penny plan is one of the things that was offered. When it went up, it was set to reduce the budget in 6 years. He wouldn't sign on to it, and I've got the red card too.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. We're going to start at the very end there with Mr. Scupine with this question. We'll work our way back now. According to your interpretation, in what way are all men created equal?
All men are created equal before God, their maker. We have certain inalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. When government steps in and does things like passing CISA, they begin to take some of those rights away from us. They violate our Fourth Amendment right, the right from illegal search and seizure. Congressman Collins voted for this bill. He's voted for the Patriots Act, another bill that allows government to come in and declare you to be a terrorist simply because they want you to be. They don't have to have any proof. They can put you in jail. You do not have the right to habeas corpus under that act. And again, our current congressman voted for both of these things. So if you continue to want someone up there that's going to violate your constitutional rights with their voting record every time something comes up, then you need to send Doug Collins back up there, because he's doing an excellent job at violating the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution. And I'm not going to take my full minutes. I think that pretty well sums it up.
Thank you, Mr. Fontaine. Same question for you. According to your interpretation, what way are all men created equal?
This question came up every time I taught a class in political science, and you know, I tell my students, obviously all men are not created equal. Your instructor is much more handsome than anybody in the classroom. And, to make the point. Anyway, we have.
You on a formal with eye doctor?
We have equal opportunity. Everybody obviously is created a bit different, and fortunate for us that they are, otherwise it would be a pretty dull world. So we have the opportunity. And from this, within our Declaration of Independence is where it starts out. We have to look at, you know, what are we doing here? We're giving sovereign power to the government because it is the thing to do for our convenience. Without government, we would have a complete chaos and lawlessness. So we give some of those powers to the government. The problem that I see is, and it's not brought up very often, is statutory law. The Congress will pass laws, but that's not where the problem comes in, because they're reacting to what people want, and they'll say, oh, we give the people this. Well, they come up with a law. Sometimes it's quite a bit, like the omnibus bill is that thick, but most laws are for a purpose, and it's turned over to the bureaucracy. Now, how many people here read the Congressional Federal Register? You don't have to, because that's cruel and unusual punishment, so don't worry about it. But they get the opportunity, the bureaucracy gets the opportunity to make life really complicated for you, and this is where we have a problem with government. And there is no oversight of this, no going back to check and see what we've done.
Okay, Mr. Fitzpatrick, according to your interpretation, in what way are all men created equal?
Thomas Jefferson in the Declaration made it very clear that it was a self-evident truth that all are created equal. And the primary way that people are created equal is through opportunity. We each have the same opportunity to make of ourselves the best that we can be. To borrow a little phrase from the United States Army there. But you look at the big three unalienable rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You know, in those three, along with all other unalienable rights, you have full opportunity to be able to live your life to the fullest. You have full opportunity to live your life in liberty. You have full opportunity to be able to pursue happiness in whatever fashion that you can. And obviously all of our unalienable rights have limits. We can't do anything with our rights that are going to violate anybody else's. But you know, that same paragraph goes on to say that governments are instituted among men to secure these rights. And any time that government infringes upon your unalienable right in any way, your ability to pursue whatever it is that you want to do so that you can have that full opportunity. Anytime government infringes on that, government has overstepped the bounds. Now, if you ask yourself, if you're honest with yourself, can you truly say that the federal government is securing our rights right now? I would say that they are more inclined to be taking them away rather than securing them. So we need to work to make sure that the federal government is reined in so that we can have full opportunity to live our lives according to our unalienable rights.
Mr. Collins, according to your interpretation, in what way are all men created equal?
I think for me, that really goes back to the very nature of faith. It goes back to Scripture. It says the Scripture tells us that he knitted us in our mother's womb. He knew us before we had a name. He knew us before we were in that womb. It is His impression. It is His breath breathed into us. It is life. It's the very thing that we have. And when you begin to think about that, I want you to look around for a second. Look around at each other. Nobody you're going to meet today, whether you agree with them or disagree, and we can have disagreements and we'll go on with that and discuss, but everybody that you see today is someone that God dearly loves. There's not a person you meet today that God does not dearly love. If you have that kind of impression of life, if you believe that that is how all men are made equal, then you go back to the source of that equalness, and that is God Himself who gave us that life. And when you have that commonality, then you have an understanding that life is about the opportunity that He has given. It's about the opportunity that He wants us to have. And what is a moment of interest? And since it was thrown in on a question I think, frankly, was more of a philosophy and life question, I'm the only one on this stage who's actually defended somebody's Fourth Amendment rights in court, who's actually been there to help them as they walk through. And CISPA, yes, was an interesting bill because it also allowed businesses and communication on a voluntary basis with government to actually stop the cyber attacks that we're seeing in our country. And then I can't tell you how many times I've heard, and frankly, it's just not fair. A citizen is not held in detention impermanently. A citizen has the same rights that he always has had, and this is the kind of issues we have. But go back to something today. If you can't think of anything else we say, and probably for the most part, most of us will say stuff you might remember, might not remember. Remember this. Then no matter where you go today, you can look at somebody in the eye and you can smile and you can know that that light in their eye was not placed by themselves, it was breathed in by the very life of God. And that's how all men are created equal.
Mr. Brown, according to your interpretation, in what way are all men created equal?
Well, I go to the only standard of truth that I know, and that's God's inerrant word, the Holy Bible. He says that in the Bible that we're created in God's image. That's what it says in Genesis. And we are. We're created in God's image. We're given a free will. The Bible also says that we've all sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. That's in Romans. And it also says that the payment of sin is death. It's an eternal death. And so we're all created equally that way. And when we accept Jesus Christ, as I did him in my mid-40s, to be my own Lord and Savior, we are transferred out of a worldly life, a life of this destined to eternal damnation, as Scripture says, into being a child of God. And our founding fathers believe very firmly in the inerrancy of God's Word, of the Holy Bible. And I do too. Our Constitution's written on those. Roger talked about the preamble of the Declaration of Independence. We are to be treated equally under the law. No one is above the law. Not the President of the United States down to regular people like all of us that are here today. We should all be treated equally under the law, but we're not being that way. It's because Republicans and Democrats in Washington, the establishment in Washington, D.C., are creating a special class in Washington. We've got to go back to the foundational principles that made this country great. And that's of limited government, the enumerated powers. The establishment don't believe that. They believe government can do anything and everything it wants to. We're losing our liberty and freedom. We're losing our rights, our God-given rights that are supposed to be protected by the Constitution. We've got to go back to that.
Thank you very much. And we have been asked to center this flag instead of leaving it here on the end of the table. So Brian is going to do that for us.
Hey, Brian. Turn that yellow light. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it.
This is our test group to get ourselves set up properly. Okay, we are going to begin our second question. And I will first read a paragraph to you about the beliefs of the Tea Party, just so you can have a frame of reference for the next question. And if at any point you need the question or the paragraph repeated, just ask me to repeat that, and I'm happy to do that. The Fannin County Tea Party Patriots believe in individual liberty, constitutional government, less taxes, free markets, and that nearly every problem in America can be solved by restoring the concepts of the United States Constitution. They also believe that no American should run for public office until he understands the Constitution and the wishes of the Founding Fathers. So some of the questions that we're asking to you today are based on those beliefs. So that's kind of the framework for the questions. So here's our next question, and we're going to start with Congressman Collins on this question. Our Founding Fathers were very specific about the reason for creating a government. According to them, what is the purpose of government?
I think the Founding Fathers, after coming through the breaking from Britain, breaking from using the Declaration of Independence, going through the war, coming through the Articles of Confederation, leading us up to the Constitution that we have today, understood that there was a need for not this, as it is basically equals in many, out of many, one. And I think what's the understanding there is there's a perspective of federalism. There's a perspective for the states, that the states should be that place where government and the localities is best held. That is the ultimate idea of where new ideas should come from. That's where the states have sovereignty. Then there are issues in which are listed in the Constitution, then also that have been affirmed through amendments and processes we go, that say here's where the federal goes. But I think the biggest, first and foremost role of our federal government is to protect and defend the United States. It is to oversee that gift that we have been given. The gift that we've been given that has overstood many, many years of internal wars, external wars. It's been the life of all around the world. If you want to go somewhere, you don't see them running to other places to find liberty and freedom. You see them coming here. When they look for an example, they come here. I think the Founding Fathers have started a process that others want to be like. It is our job as we continue to have these debates just like this, to take these ideas so that shows the world that freedom is first and foremost, that liberty is first and foremost, and that the rights of the people are always vested and sovereign in what we do.
Thank you very much. Our next question will be, or the same question for Mr. Fitzpatrick. You will be next. Our founding fathers were very specific about the reason for creating a government. According to them, what is the purpose of government, in your opinion?
I've already mentioned at one time, the purpose of government is to secure our rights. That's it, to secure our rights. Now, you can go on and you can talk about a lot of things that are in relation to that. Doug mentioned that the government's supposed to defend against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Yes, but in so doing, that is securing our rights. We have unalienable rights. We also have vested rights. We have those that, yes, are given to us by the government, but our government's job is to secure every right so that you can pursue your life any way you see fit. And so we need to have a government that is very limited in nature, that is very focused on its job. You know, Thomas Jefferson also said the number one duty of government is to adore God. That's the number one duty of government. Fiscal responsibility, securing our rights. All of these things are the purpose of government. It is not to tell you what you may or may not do, but simply to secure our rights.
Thank you very much. All right, Mr. Fontaine, in your opinion, what is the purpose of government, according to the Founding Fathers?
According to the Founding Fathers, our purpose of the government was to eliminate what they had, first of all, which was, the King George V. What we want out of government is to secure our rights. Our right is to live our life. Now, without government, we would have chaos. With pure democracy, we would have chaos because pure democracy means that everybody can do what they please, and you can imagine what would happen from there. So we have a Republican form of government, which means that we have the people up here that are vying for an office to represent you. This is what they had in mind. They started off, of course, with the Declaration of Independence, which was written actually about 100 years before Thomas Jefferson, but we won't go there. It is a very good document, and so are the Federalist Papers. They explain in great detail what our government was about. But basically, it was well said here that, to secure our rights. Now, my right, and I explain this to students, my right to shake my fist, and my right, my First Amendment right, ends at the beginning of Roger's nose. So, you cannot do harm to others, so you have to let everybody live. Okay. But that is the main point, that we have to have respect for each other, and this goes back to what was said a little bit earlier about the Judeo-Christian ethics. That's what our government was founded based on, and there is a reason for that. That's what we live by, and that's what we need to remember. That is what the Founding Fathers had in mind.
Thank you very much. Mr. Scupine, according to the Founding Fathers, what is the purpose of government?
Well, Roger pretty well nailed it. The purpose of government is to secure our inalienable rights. Those are the rights that are given us to us by God. They're rights that don't really have to be written down. We all really know what they are. We know we've got the right to defend our families and defend ourselves from aggression. But sometimes we do need government to step in to help us do those things, but it doesn't mean that we lose those rights. Ben Franklin told us that if we want to give up freedom for the sake of security, then we deserve neither. Doug Collins told us a while ago why he voted for the Patriots Act and for the system. He basically said we need to take some of your freedom so that we can be free. Really? I don't go with that. That is not my understanding of what a government is supposed to be doing. There are right ways to go about finding out what's going on in this nation that we already had in place. We didn't need to give up any of our rights to government so that they can come in and protect us. We don't need to be searched constantly to have our rights violated by government. Every time you go to the airport, your rights are violated. There are other ways that we know that you can better serve freedom than the way this nation has taken it down this road since the terrorists came into our existence. We need to use some of these ways. We need to get away from political correctness, and we need to start doing the things that will really protect America and quit going through the motions where we pretend to take care of America and protect America. Until we do that, America is not going to be safe. One of the presidential candidates brought out to the forefront the danger of the Islam religion being brought into this nation. And I have the red card, and if you want to hear the rest of that, you'll have to come back to me.
Thank you very much. You're all doing a great job following the rules when you see the yellow card and the red card.
I think we are going to say something here, though, because that's not what I said, Mike. What I said was, what it did is it allowed businesses to give information voluntarily, work with the government to deal with cyber threats on which our Wall Street and other banks and also our regular business are being attacked every day. I said that it does not take a citizen and take away their habeas corpus rights. It does not take away their Fourth Amendment right. Now, again, as one who's actually represented those in court, which, you know, I know you talk about it all the time. I'm not a lawyer, but what I'm saying is right. Well, maybe law school ought to be in your curriculum. Is actually looking at, is saying that when you look at these issues, you look at what is going on here, let's at least be honest with what I said. Didn't get into the other. Let's at least be honest with what I said.
All right, let's continue with our final candidate who has this particular question. Gentlemen, let's continue with Mr. Brown, give you an opportunity to speak for your 2 minutes. Our founding fathers are very specific about the reason for creating a government. Mr. Brown, according to them, what is the purpose of government?
Before you today, you've got 3 people, and only 3, that truly believe in the Constitution as our founding fathers meant it. Mike Scooping down at the far end, it's Roger Fitzpatrick in the middle, and me on this end. You see, this document, the U.S. Constitution, is supposed to enumerate, to protect your rights. I disagree with the use of secure, but I know that Roger and Mike are, when they're talking about securing our rights, they're talking about the same thing. And that's protecting your God-given rights, and that's what our founding fathers meant. Our current congressman has voted for that omnibus bill. I've already said that it is totally unconstitutional. Well, not totally. It actually has some increased funding for our military, which I am very much in favor of. But it reauthorized and funded a whole lot of big government, and that's what the establishment in Washington are doing. They are voting for bigger government, and it's taking our rights and our liberty away. We've got to go back to the original intent of the Constitution. There are 4 questions I utilized when I served in Congress to help me determine whether I was going to vote yes or no on a piece of legislation. All 4 questions had to be yes, and I pledge to you I'll do the same thing as your congressman. The first question, is it biblically correct? Second question, is it constitutional according to the original intent? Is it one of the 18 enumerated powers? The third question, do we need it? And fourth, can we afford it? The omnibus bill fails all 4 of those questions. I would not have voted for it. And I pledge to you today that I will continue to vote on those 4 questions, and I'm the only candidate here before you who has that proven constitutional voting record.
I'd like to make a rebuttal there.
15
I
seconds.
was left out by exception there, and I take great exception to what was said. I taught the Constitution for 15 years. I know something about it, and I backed it up with 30 years of service. And I am a survivor from the military. So I know the Constitution, and I taught it, and I believe in it, and we will make it work.
Bernie, let me explain why you got left out, and it's okay, because yesterday you had the audacity to call him a career politician, which he is. You know, he's ran since 1992, basically, for every office that he's come into. You know, I also like it when he said earlier today, he said that, you know, he looked at, been asked to run in the 9th district. Well, also we know of meetings in the 3rd district he was asked to run in, the 11th district he was asked to run in, the 10th district, which he had.
Gentlemen, wait a minute, gentlemen, but we didn't put up the rules if you were named. I'm sorry, the people that made the rules today have only put time in to answer the question. So we need to stay with that. We have let it open up a little bit. Let's go to question 3. We're going to start with Mr. Fitzpatrick. Mr. Fitzpatrick, are you in favor of the federal government relinquishing control over now federal departments? If you agree, what federal department, for example, Department of Education, IRS, or so on, would you eliminate? Give us specific reasons.
The federal government relinquishing control as in abolishing? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes. And what department
Which
and
one
how
do you
would you
pick? Oh, I'll say two. I'll say two. The two most egregious departments, yeah, it's hard to say that even. IRS, EPA, education, golly, there's so many of them. But you know, the IRS, I would go to a fair tax, and so we wouldn't even need the IRS at all. We would be able to send all of our tax money to Atlanta, and then Atlanta can send it directly to the Treasury Department. So we don't even need the IRS at all. Do away with the EPA. And all of their egregious regulations that are robbing you of your inalienable rights. And in the Environmental Protection Division at the state level could easily handle all of those things. Get rid of the Department of Education, because we've already got, let me tell you something. The Department of Education's primary job is to indoctrinate your children so they don't understand the founding of this nation, and they want to turn it into a socialist country, and we have got to do something about that, because we are losing it. Lincoln once said that if you let me educate your children, I will take over your country, paraphrase. But that's what's happening. We have the curriculum that's being changed, and it's being pushed down the throats of our children, and the vast majority of the American people do not understand what's going on in our public schools. And so those would be the primary three that I would work to abolish.
General Fontaine, the same question. Are you in favor of the federal government relinquishing control over now federal departments? If you agree, what federal departments, again, Department of Education, IRS, and so on, would you eliminate?
Right, that's like asking me if I support motherhood. Yes, there are quite a few departments and so on that have been brought up. It goes back to the Constitution, if you will, in that the broad interpretation by liberals is that the pursuit of happiness means giving them what they want, and they want to take over. The quote was from Lenin, that is correct. And you see what is going on. This has been a trend going on. We have to turn it around and move it the other way. Now, it's not going to be as easy as all that. We start with, say the IRS is a great target. They've been around in one form or another since 1913. It's going to take some time to turn these things around, and you have to know the nuances and all of the regulations and so forth, like 73,000 pages though. We need to get that changed and go back to, hopefully, towards a fair tax, which is, you know, kind of a oxymoron, actually. We all want fair tax, obviously. So that is a good example. Department of Education, Department of Energy, all these departments really could be abolished and perhaps put into, as you know, one desk in the Department of the Interior, so that we can coordinate between the states and bring federalism back. That's what we need to do. get rid of these departments. It is a growing bureaucracy. I have worked with the bureaucracy for 30 years. I know that it grows on its own because the system is such that it enhances growth. If I'm going to be successful in the bureaucracy, I have to build it up, and that will build me up. So that is the problem we've seen over the years. We need to get rid of that problem, and we need to get rid of those departments that we all know about and want to see gone. Thank you.
Mr. Skupin, the same question. Are you in favor of the federal government relinquishing control over now federal departments? If you agree, what federal departments would you eliminate?
I definitely agree, and I hate it that we just have to pick one or two, because almost every department that's up there fails this standard, the Constitution. But I start with the Department of Education, and the reason I would start there is because they are destroying the future of America. The IRS would have to come right in behind there, because we've already watched the IRS come in and attack groups of people and individuals simply because of their beliefs. We don't need any kind of a bureaucracy that has that kind of power and authority, and Congress has done nothing really to curb their regulations. Yeah, they cut a little funding to the IRS when they did that, but did that change their regulations and their mentality? No, it didn't. They're still doing the same kind of things they were doing before. The Every Student Succeeds Act, which Congressman Collins voted for, and he claims that stopped Common Core. But I want you to dig deeper into that bill. You need to read that bill so you'll know whether he's giving us more dog and pony show, because what happens is every state must submit a plan to the Department of Education for approval. Now, if they don't approve your plan, which means you've got to be doing what they want you to do, or they're not going to approve it, do we really have freedom to make changes? And I say we don't, because you don't go with what they say, they're going to cut off your funding. The whole thing needs to be cut off. We need no funding from the federal government. We need the states to stand up and do their sovereign duty and take control over education again. And we need the IRS totally eliminated. Probably the fair tax may be the best plan I have seen that's out there, and I would endorse that right now.
Mr. Brown, are you in favor of the federal government relinquishing control over federal departments? If you agree, what federal departments would you eliminate?
I absolutely agree with that. In fact, when I was in Congress, I wrote a bill to get rid of the Department of Education totally. It's very difficult to write because the Department of Education has its tentacles into a whole lot of different areas of your life. And in fact, even the United Nations is tied into, and United Nations policies are tied into the U.S. Department of Education. The omnibus bill funded the Department of Education fully. In fact, not only have we reauthorized the establishment in Washington, reauthorized the Department of Education, but in the Every Student Succeeds Act that Mike Skupin told you about, but the omnibus bill funds it completely. There was not a whimper, not the least whimper of an effort to stop this out-of-control government that both political parties have built. I want to let teachers teach. Let's get rid of the Department of Education totally. Let's get rid of the Department of Commerce. Let's get rid of the Department of Labor. Let's get rid of the Department of Energy. Let's get rid of the EPA also. And let's get rid of the IRS. Article 1, Section 8, which starts right here in this little booklet and goes to right here, only contains 18 things that the federal government has, under the original intent of the Constitution, only 18 things here that the federal government is supposed to be doing. National security, national defense should be the major function of the federal government. And we're not doing that. We're not taking care of our veterans. The veteran will not have a better friend in Washington than Paul Brown. Neither will men and women in the military. We don't have enough ships in the Navy. We don't have enough brigades in the Army. We don't have enough wings in the Air Force. And I'm a U.S. Marine. I can tell you, God knows we don't have enough Marines. We need to spend money on the things that the federal government's supposed to be spending money on and get rid of all the rest of the departments.
Mr. Collins, are you in favor of the federal government relinquishing control over the any federal departments? If you agree, what federal departments would you eliminate?
I agree as well. I think I'm going to use something, and Paul, don't slip out of your chair. I agree with Paul's last sentence. We got to get priority spending, and I agree with him on that. And I think you can do, and we've already named them. We can go back through them. It's a popular thing: education, EPA, energy, commerce. These are all departments that need to go. They're not. They're the lasting gift, especially two of them of our only Georgia president, Jimmy Carter. They should be gone. But let's also talk about the reality here. Let's also talk about what we really need to look at. We can eliminate the entire basis of funding for every department up there, and we're still not going to come right at balancing the budget. If you really want to talk about where we're going to save money, if you really want to talk about honest answers and saying we can cut everything we want here, and that's fine, but until you start dealing with about 70 to 80% of the total spending, which is found in Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, pension payments, these kind of issues here, then you're just simply up here and we're talking to you and telling you what departments need to go. That's great. But you're not going to balance the budget with, and we can eliminate them all. That needs to happen. But until we deal with the real drivers, until you deal with the Medicare and Medicaid costs that are starting to go skyrocket in 2016, 2017. When you start dealing with Social Security, which right now is basically a life support issue as it is. When we deal with the disability payments that have grown exponentially since the recession of 2007-2008, then you can have the conversation. We can have these conversations, and I agree completely. Be the first in line. But also the other issue is here is you've got to deal with these big drivers, because if you don't deal with about 80% of your budget, that's basically all the tax dollars that we bring in just cover that. And if you don't have those conversations, then your budget's not going anywhere.
All right, thank you very much. To try to stay within our time frame, we're already over just a little bit. Our next question is going to be for 1 minute. And the question is, which Supreme Court judge depicts what you would like to see in the next Supreme Court judge? And we'll start with you, Mr. Brown, on this one. So, to our timekeeper, just 1 minute on this particular question.
Clarence Thomas. Clarence Thomas is the most constitutional of all of the U.S. Supreme Court justices, and the one who's very, very close to Clarence Thomas is my good friend Nino Scalia, who obviously just died. Whoever our president is, and that's the reason this presidential election is so important, whoever our president is needs to nominate somebody that's just like Nino Scalia and Clarence Thomas to be our next Supreme Court justice. That's the reason this presidential election is so critically important. We cannot and must not let a Democrat be the president of the United States.
Thank you very much. All right, Congressman Collins, the question is to you. Which Supreme Court justice depicts what you would like to see in the next one?
Well, I think we've got two that we've had. Justice Thomas, of course, which is, by the way, how many of you here know Justice Thomas is from Georgia? If you didn't know that, we ought to take pride in the fact Justice Thomas is from Georgia. We don't often talk about that. In fact, most of the country would be shamed. Oh, Justice Thomas. Justice Thomas is one of the best ones we got up there, and he's from Georgia. We ought to take pride in that. Scalia, I mean, you talk about a hole being left. What I love about Scalia is he just didn't write conservative opinions. He went out and actually forcefully advocated his opinion. He took on in his writing those things. But I'm also go back to one that I'd like to see who started what we'll call the whole process problem that we have with Supreme Court justice. That's Justice Bork. Let's go back to the 80s. Let's go back in a time in which you start talking about the beginnings of this kind of conservative. I would actually go back to him. So that's why this is important.
Thank you very much. All right, to Mr. Fitzpatrick, which Supreme Court justice depicts what you would like to see in the next one?
The one that comes most closely to what my standard would be, which obviously would be the original intent of the Constitution, would be Clarence Thomas. John Roberts was a big disappointment, obviously. But anybody that we put to fill in that ninth spot has got to be somebody that is going to uphold the original intent. And, you know, I hear every time that we have an election that this is the most important election. And, you know, and I guess that's true, because every time that we have an election, we just keep sliding more and more into the abyss. And, you know, and with the choices that are before us, it's obvious who I'm going to vote for president. But, you know, we have got to have an appointee that is going to adhere to original intent, because if we get anybody that's even to just a little bit to the left of that, can you imagine if we were to have another John Roberts who voted on key issues, and we've already got 4 staunch liberals, my apologies, red flag. That's right, I forgot we had one.
All right, Mr. Fontaine, the same question to you. Which Supreme Court justice depicts what you would like to see in the next Supreme Court justice?
I think it's been well said by everybody before me here, so I have no problem with what's been said. But we need to remember that this is something that the Senate has to deal with. So the next group, I believe, that you're going to be talking to or hearing, excuse me, is the Senate candidates, and they're the ones that will be doing the confirmation. We need to get away from this liberal interpretation, like, you know, the life and pursuit of happiness is to give everybody what they want, you know, a free meal for everybody. But obviously, like Congressman Collins said, somebody has to pay for it, and that's where we need to be looking. So, yeah, we need to watch out who gets appointed. Keep an eye on that. Thank you.
And finally, Mr. Skupin, your thoughts on this question?
Well, I have to agree with what's said here. Clarence Thomas, I think, is probably the epitome of what we need, because he does his very best to go back to the original intent of the Constitution when he's allowed to do so. And one thing I want just to point out along this line is Article 3 is where the judiciary gets their power from our Constitution. And it's very important to realize that Article 3 follows Article 1, Section 8. It doesn't precede it. It follows it for a reason. That's because the powers that are given to the Supreme Court have already been listed in Article 1, Section 8. And if you'll read that, you're going to find out something. Marriage is not in there. Abortion is not in there. None of these decisions are legal.
That's right.
They are opinions made by an illegal bunch of people because they had no right to make those rulings. This is what they're supposed to go by. This is the guideline for them. And many courts now have refused to do it, and that's our fault for not holding people accountable.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. At this time, we're going to go into our closing statements. Mr. Skupin, 2 minutes to close.
I'd like to start out with asking you a question. How many, please raise your hand if you believe in term limits? Nearly everybody. I see some guys way back there in the back that apparently don't believe in term limits. Senator Goose doesn't seem to believe in it. Oh, the other hand comes up. Folks, we have an opportunity here to practice term limits if you believe in it. He's been up there 4 years. It's time for him to come home and sit down. If you want to know who an establishment person is when they're running, you need to do 2 things. Look at who's giving them money and look at who has the most signs. That will tell you who is establishment. $44,000 went to him from the Leadership PAC, which is the leadership groups in Congress. Remember that when you go to the polls and vote. And one thing I want to point out, and that has to do with the Supremacy Clause. I am sick of hearing men like our Secretary of State tell us that the Supremacy Clause means that anything the federal government does supersedes the states. If that is a true statement, we do not have a Constitution. The Congress up there can do anything they want to do, which is what they have been doing. This is the very reason why I got in this race. I'm tired of watching Congressman Collins go along with the establishment up there.
Amen.
Every time he votes, he's following leadership. He sits on the House Rules Committee because he's willing to follow leadership. Yep. All these things are things that give us clues as to what he's doing. Forget what he comes back and tells us. Look at his record. Look at who's making donations to him. And then make your decision based on facts, not based on the dog and pony show he keeps giving us.
2 minutes to close, Mr. Fontaine.
Thank you. Well, we know what the problems are, and as my motto says, don't complain, vote for Fontaine. Well, let's look at the complaints. We know what they are. We've heard them articulated here quite well. And the question now is, what do we do about it? Okay, I go back to, we have 2 career politicians and 3 citizen candidates. And what do we do about it? We need to find somebody that can make it happen, change it. It requires leadership. There is no leadership in Congress. It just really saddens me to see that the so-called leader of the House of Representatives was up there with a group of people that looked pretty sad to me. There was no leadership at all in that group. There is no leadership. I believe that we're going to have a big change in Congress. There's going to be a lot of new people showing up there. There's also going to be some going back that will have what I call religion, because they'll have made it by the skin of their teeth. At that point is the time when we can make a change to the establishment. Now, the establishment has become a word in the English language that is now used as a derogatory statement. And it is just that. There's a reason it's just that. It needs to be changed. The antiquated system where you go up there and it's just based on how long you've been there and how you get along. It's a get along, go along, get along type of situation. That has gotten us into the situation that we're in now. We need people who will stand up that have gotten things done in the past. And I was told recently by a reporter that you sound like Donald Trump. And I've had worse things said about me than that, I can tell you that. The lady with the Trump sign just looked up, by the way. Yeah, so the first thing that I want to do, whoops, I've got my red card there. I'm sorry, sir. Okay.
Mr. Fitzpatrick, 2 minutes to close, please.
You know, the United States of America became the greatest nation on the face of the earth for a reason. It was not by accident. It is because the federal government, in large part, for many, many years, adhered to original intent of the Constitution. That's why. And the reason that we are not as high on the pinnacle of greatness, let me put it like that, because we're still the greatest, is because we have more and more and more, we have gotten away from that original intent. The federal government has grown and grown and grown and grown far beyond the bounds that the founding fathers ever intended for us, for it to be. And I want to read some numbers to you that I mean, I am highly concerned on this. Last year, 52% of the federal budget was made up of Medicare, Medicaid, Obamacare, and Social Security. 52%. Mandatory spending and interest alone by 2020, 4 years from now, will consume 75% of the budget. Interest on the debt by 2025, only 9 years from now, will balloon to $772 billion per year. And then this one was the one that scares me the most. By 2033, only 17 years from now, entitlements and interest will consume all revenues. And you have to think about this in terms of the last 2 years have been the highest 2 years of revenue, and yet entitlements and interest will consume all revenues, and we have got to do that, or else this nation will cease to be the greatest nation on the face of the earth. Thank you.
Mr. Collins, 2 minutes to close.
I appreciate y'all coming out today. It's a good day as well. But you know, there's one interesting thing is our country is in a position that is changed. This election cycle, and you look at the president, is something in which we're looking at the future. And we've heard a lot of talk about the Constitution this morning, and I'll even bring up Mike again. And Mike brought up the easy. There's a lot of things with bumper stickers these days. I'll tell you, the answers of our life are not bumper stickers. And by the way, term limits. Mike, while I'm finishing, find term limits in the Constitution. Term limits of the Constitution were found in elections. And that's why you're here today. That's why you're here. Because when you look at it, and you look at the issues that we go about, we need to make sure that we're thinking about these who are over here in the swings. There are people that are here. Looking at the real answers of dealing with, as Roger talked about, we're dealing with the things that are driving our spending, the things that are taking that need to do tax reform. Looking at our spending and looking at it, things under Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, the things that are very much pushing us where we can't make priority spending more, where we're pushed to the debt, where our levels of debt keep us from doing the very things that we're supposed to be doing. Again, at the end of the day, it's about being honest. It's about saying, here's what we're for and here's why we're doing it. We've always been open. We'll talk to you about it. Now, we can disagree, and my opponents disagree with me. That's fine. That's the election system. That's what the founders had set for. If you want a constitutional system, you're looking at it right here. But one of the things I'll always tell you, if you want to know a question, I'll show you the backup. If you want to know anything I've said about anybody here, I'll show you the backup. Then you can make your choice. When we understand that, that's what makes America great. That is what is the hope of the next generation. And that is why we're here today. And as the sun shines, we know that tomorrow will come. Because at the end of the day, we know who holds the future. And it ain't any of us. He's still shining above. Thank you, and God bless. Hope your vote on May 24th.
Mr. Brown, 2 minutes to close.
As you look at who to vote for, you've got two radically different choices. One is establishment. One is Doug Collins, who's voted for every single funding bill that's come down the pike since he's been there. The omnibus bill is the greatest example of how out of touch he is with this district.
That's right.
And with this nation, with the future of our country. Because that omnibus bill does fund Planned Parenthood. It does fund Obamacare. And I mentioned that on and on. It creates another $500 billion worth of debt. And Roger's right. I've been fighting the debt. I've never voted for an omnibus bill. I've never voted for a tax increase. I've never voted to raise the debt ceiling. All that has to stop. And that's what the establishment in Washington is doing. And that's what I fought against when I was there. I have that proven constitutional leadership that I exhibited, so you can look at my record. Madison Project gave me the greatest compliment I've ever had, and they said this: many elected Republicans lay claim to a conservative voting record, and many Republican candidates promise to deliver the world to conservative primary voters, yet few come to the ankles of Paul Brown in terms of a proven commitment to constitutional governance. It is not an exaggeration to say that Congressman Paul Brown has sustained the most conservative voting record over the longest period of time of any sitting Republican in Congress. Even the fiercest conservative fighters tend to succumb to the establishment meat grinder after a few years. Paul Brown has been inviolable. I'm fed up with what's going on in Washington. We've got to make a change. Come join me, the Fed Up Express, to save America. Vote for Paul Brown as your U.S. Congressman, the only proven constitutionalist running in this race. Vote Paul Brown.
Okay, folks, that concludes our U.S. 9th District Congressional Forum. We thank each one of these gentlemen. Now, a couple of you wrote on cards, and we didn't have time to get to your questions, but the candidates are here, so if there's something you wish we would have asked or you want to ask them, not right now, you can get these candidates outside before they leave and ask them your questions. If we can get the U.S. Senate candidates now to